give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? Right. So we left off with peace and liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also left off with like a little bit of curiosity about all of the downloads that are coming, because there's a moment that we are experiencing right now in the United States where if you are speaking against the current administration, or if you are an organization that is doing work that the administration doesn't approve of, I'm going to name it, DEI being one of the major components of it. If you are an educational institution that is not pushing forward the narrative that is being approved through government agencies right now, and if you are folks that are in entertainment and you're speaking in a way that the administration is not happy with, then it does cause for you to be targeted in some way, either losing your job, if you're an organization not getting funded, if you're a corporation not getting whatever the breaks are that are necessary with corporate businesses. If you are an individual, you might be getting your social media shut down. So all of these things speak into the lack of free speech and autonomy and freedom that people are experiencing or having to be cautious about experiencing in the United States in this moment, which is to be somebody who has been raised in the United States with the narrative communication that I got from school about how it is that we're supposed to exist as U.S. citizens. To be living in this moment where we're not afforded those same privileges is really shocking and unnerving. And there's a curiosity because during this podcast, for those who have gone through and listened to most of our sessions that have been dropped, there are, we speak into a lot of the social tension that is happening. We name white supremacy, we name race relations, we name the violence that's happening in Palestine. We speak into the harm of the administration. We talk about the building of the white nation. We are speaking into subject matter content that might not be or might be targeted and or being watched by our administration at this point in time. To Deanne's point of how many downloads in the last 2 days from Virginia?
In the last 2 days from Virginia alone, we had 67 downloads the first day and 66 the second. And whoever's listening has been listening to a wide range of episodes. So yeah, so it's not
They're picking
lost
up
on
the
me that it's
keywords.
not from Virginia.
AI is checking us out and wasting water somewhere
Yeah, it
in
could be
some
a bot. It could be a bot. It could not be. It might be, I mean, but I thought it was pretty sus that it was coming from Virginia.
And what do you think some of the implications of that are? Like, what are some of the possibilities of things that have gone through your head? Like, so one of the things is that we have been intentional about the language choice, about naming certain specific names at this point, different than maybe at our first 10, 20, 30 episodes even, where we were just straight talking. But now that we're seeing kind of like these legislative changes and we're seeing like the repercussions and pushback that's happening in community, it does cause your body and your mind and your intention to shift to be like, how do I create my safety for myself and not be more of a target, but then still have the authenticity to speak into the realities of what you're thinking or experiencing.
And we've been seeing this for, at least the past 2 years, but certainly in the past 6 months to a year of, you might have noticed when you're on social media and you're seeing people posting things about Palestine and about Gaza, not using specific words, spelling them differently, calling it Izzy instead of the state that shall not be named. And so that's kind of what I think you're talking about is like the shifting, the slow shifting of language, being able to even put into print, like, because the algorithms all work in a certain way that if you use captions on your social media posts, which a lot of people do for, accessibility, you can go in and change you can tweak the captions before you make the post a lot of times, and so they're spelling words differently so that they don't hit the algo, they don't
Yeah.
hit whatever AI filters that might be working out there that are looking for specific keywords to flag specific posts. People are changing the way they're putting things in writing. They're changing the way they spell things in their comments or in the written portion of a post on Instagram, for example. So yeah, I mean, I reached out to you when I first saw the 60 some downloads and I realized it was all from Virginia. I reached out to you immediately and I was like, I mean, I'm not scared, but I'm more worried for you. I'm more worried for because I know you're not in this country, but you want to be able to travel and you want to be able to come see your kids and so those are things that we don't know. There has been talk about people's passports being pulled, not being renewed, not being, flagged or having them be flagged for specific infractions that the administration deems an infraction. And that's a classic fascistic piece of the playbook, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's possible. I mean, we could get deplatformed. They could pull.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was a very active YouTube channel called African Stream that got completely
Oh
deplatformed
yeah.
after Secretary Blinken in a press conference called them a terrorist organization because he didn't
Mm.
like what they were speaking into about what was really happening on the ground
Mm-hmm.
on the continent. They didn't, our Secretary of State didn't like that. And that's Blinken. So that's during Biden's. For any of you that want to blame everything on Trump, that was during Biden's
Mm-hmm.
administration. And they got completely deplatformed. Everything was taken down. Their YouTube, everything that they had uploaded, all the videos were gone. And
Interesting.
and in a flash of an instant. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
happened so quickly. And so it's possible
So
those.
we can get deplatformed. We don't have all of the followers to be considered as influencers, but
No,
if
not
people
yet.
are starting to be curious about some of the things that our administration doesn't want people to be listening to or thinking about, then our platform would definitely be one of the ones that people would be interested in checking in to what we're saying.
Yeah. So, I mean, you may see a change in some of our titles. We may not use some buzzwords. I mean, you and I can talk about what changes we want to make on that to not hit that algo. It might be too little, too late, but I don't think you and I or either one of us are in the interest of or interested in changing what we talk about because that's what we started this podcast for to start with in the beginning. So again, I said I'm not scared, but I know that the repercussions could be real and even a little hard to imagine because we are in, especially in this country, we are in the on the US territory. We're in uncharted waters in a lot of ways. I mean, there are other cultures and other countries that we've watched go through fascistic takeovers, and so we have knowledge of what could happen, but we haven't necessarily seen it to this level and this
Experienced it,
right.
right,
So
in the way that we're familiar with,
way
because
that
it
we
has been happening,
it
but just
has
like in the way that we're from enough where we as individuals can sit here and say, well, this is a concern. We're recognizing that, downloads are coming from this place,
yeah.
even if it might have been a school, right? It might have been
Yeah,
University
very
of Virginia.
cool. I
Could have been
love that. Thank you.
Virginia. Like
Shout
all
out
of
to
the
the school of
students,
Virginia.
all the students have to have a conversation about
I
what are
love
the
that.
social contexts between this black woman and white woman talking on a podcast. Could have been that, but it also could not be.
I'm gonna go with school.
and
I like that.
and there's something about the necessity for these conversations to happen,
Hmm.
however it is that you're looking at it, because what we're seeing is a grab for power
Yeah.
in our administration and those in our systems and structures who hold positions of power. And when I'm defining and talking about power, that's like the ability to enact some type of control over someone else. And we're seeing that streamlined throughout our structures, and we're seeing it in a very coordinated way. So,
Right.
in that coordinated way has been laid out to everyone. So, like, I was on this call called Win with Black Women. So it started out with Kamala Harris, and then it had Stacey Abrams, and then it had Judith Daniels from Advancement Project, and Michaela Angela Davis from Essence. So like all of these people who have and they meet every Sunday. I didn't know, somebody sent it to me, and I was just like, all right, let me get on this call. And we're talking about what it looks like for us to be building power right now as Black women, because we had the Trust Black Women and all of that as Kamala was going through her run for the presidency, and also the kind of like the history of the legacy of that work in the United States. And one of the things that came out of that conversation, and I thought that this was really a beautiful language, but it also put me in a curiosity of what is the best way for us to be present and be in care of ourselves. And when I say us, we, I'm just speaking into, referring to Black women at this time. And somebody said that Black women were like the consciousness of the country. And when I heard that, and when I was thinking about that, I'm like, historically, what does that look like to be the consciousness of a country? And when we think about the consciousness of the country in terms of peace and liberation, what are the different positions that different labeled demographics of our community has played in making the US what it is today? That's all being stripped away from the current, because of the current administration and the way that they are uh, doing our
Yeah.
legislation and our litigating our priorities and things like that.
Yeah, Trump said yesterday, I was watching a video, somebody was talking about it, I think on Democracy Now, and he basically said that it's illegal to speak ill of him.
Mm-hmm.
That any news organization or any journalist who speaks, who says, in his speak, writes a bad story about him, he's not eloquent in the way he phrases things, that should be illegal. It should be illegal to be able to do that. And so I love I have heard that before, the Black women are the consciousness of this country.
When
And
you hear that, what does that mean for you? Because I had a curiosity about it. What does it mean for you to hear that? Like, how does that, like, I saw your face do a thing when I said it, but so I'm just going to acknowledge that. But what does
well,
that
it's like,
mean for you?
yeah, I mean, I think it means something totally different for me now than it probably would have even 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. Now, when I hear it, I think of labor. I think of all the expectation that people lay at the feet of Black women and put on to Black women's shoulders to always be the saviors in
Mhm.
any situation, especially voting and holding people accountable and speaking truth into these voids, which just puts you into more harm's way. And on the flip side, after the election, you kept hearing Black women say, we're tired, we're just tired. You said it to me on a podcast. You were like, we're tired, we're done.
Mhm.
And so that's what comes up for me. That's probably wouldn't have been what would have come up for me before. That's through the lens of the mind that I have now.
So are you able to share and speculate about like hearing that previously? What could
Yeah,
that have meant for you?
I don't know.
Even with the relationships that you have, and I'm curious about you know non-white human beings that hear something like Black women being the consciousness, that's a lot of pressure, and when I hear it I'm like, ooh, the consciousness of a country, that's a lot of pressure. And
Yeah.
then I always go back to this understanding about how this country was literally founded suckling off of the breasts of Black women. And that's like, that's literal. So I'm talking about like from
Birth
days of
hormones after rape.
first peoples, indigenous peoples kept their communities alive. So that, and they're brown skinned folks, so we're gonna call them non. And then when we had our systems of slavery, all of the wet mothers and the wet nurses will be the ones that were actually nourishing, feeding, and raising and bringing up the children and keeping their families alive
Yes.
and making sure that the work was organized properly. Like, so the men were there doing man work, but the women had to cook the food, had to take care of the babies, had to take care of their whole families, had to make sure that people
The
got to
baby.
where they needed to go to. So the organization of that and the labor in the organization of that, and then also being the space of care and comfort as we've gone through every iteration of change, of major change, throughout the history of the United States. And so to have the pressure of being the consciousness of something, that means that you're always having to be in reflection and strategy of how to make something better, which was what this call was last night. It was like strategizing. Stacey Abrams has like a 10 steps campaign towards freedom and liberation with some good pointers for people to be able to do and participate in. But and so thinking about the pressure of that as a identified Black woman from the United States, what would you say that white women are? Black women are the consciousness of the United States. What are white women? What are white women? Because what the way that I would have thought about it before and still today, and also thinking about going into this election and thinking about how I always go back to that woman's speech. I can't remember her name now, but we spoke about it on one of our podcasts a long time ago, where she was calling where she was basically calling in white women to like retake up the United States, right before the election. Do you remember what that person's name was?
Was
She
it
was
when
the
you
vice
went to the
president.
when you
It was
went?
like the rebuttal of after one's
Oh yeah,
maybe.
yeah, yeah. The white chick with the green dress in the kitchen. Yeah.
Yes, the white chick with the green dress in the kitchen. That
Pearls.
one
The pearls. That chick. Yeah, 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 yeah.
was so funny.
Katie
But
something.
anyway,
I don't.
like if we go back to that, like right, like that was like the drum roll for like
Yeah,
white womanness to come up and white womanness to be what it is. And like and there was a specific narrative that was definitely very real about her communication to the United States.
yeah.
And so is that the heartbeat of the nation, or is that the yellow rose of Texas ideology of the nation, that positionality that white women sit in, or is it just the support of white men?
No, I think so interesting. Well, you've asked me two things that I wanted to reflect on. You were asking about, if I were to speculate, how would that have landed on me 5 to 10 years ago? I quite honestly, I think I wouldn't have had any concept of what that could mean. I would have, I can only imagine that I would have been like, what are you talking about?
Ain't
Um,
the consciousness of no nation.
I mean, well, no, I don't know that I would have even had the framework to like understand
What it
what,
means.
like how you just said it about how being the consciousness means that you are constantly in reflection, you're constantly strategizing, you're constantly trying to figure out how to survive what's going on around you, and that makes total sense to me now. I don't know that I would have known. I didn't know that. I hadn't gotten there yet in my unpacking 10 years ago, and so I probably would have not had an answer for you based on my brain of 10 years ago, because I wouldn't have known how to even unpack that in my own brain.
That's
Totally
true.
get it now and totally get what you're saying now. And when you ask me the question of what are the white women in this country, the words that come to mind are poison and cancer. And the reason those are the
Okay.
words, the reason those are the words is because of the insidiousness
Mm,
of our role that has always played. We are like we are like Israel in terms of our
mm,
ability to be the strong and the victim at the same time. Be the one that
mm,
calls the shots and the one that's oppressed at the same time. And we do that so effortlessly, no matter where we're at. That's why poison and cancer is something that comes, because when somebody gets cancer, they don't know it usually at first. They don't know
mhm,
that those cells are growing inside their body.
mhm,
And it isn't until it manifests in something outward, something that is either manifests in like illness happening in the body to which you can't function, and you go, oh shit,
Mhm.
what's going on? And then you go get checked out and you realize you got cancer and you've had it, for months or maybe even years as it's been festering. That's what I mean by cancer in terms of white women, because we have existed for hundreds of years in this, I'm the strong one, but I'm the victim. I'm the one that has all the power. I can make, I'm thinking about, I think I've brought it up before in an episode, the line in My Big Fat Greek Wedding where the mom says, the daughter, the main character wants to get her father to agree to something. And she's like, you can't get dad to be okay with this. You're not going to be able to convince him. And she says, the man is the head of the household. This is her mother. The man is the head of the household, but the woman, she is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants to at any time.
Mm.
I remember when I first,
So white women are the neck of.
well, but I remember when I first saw that in that movie, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant. That's so true. And now I think about it and I think, ugh, I mean, it's, yes, we can turn the head, but then we don't want to be culpable for turning the head. We want to, dictate what happens. We want to whisper that somebody looked at us wrong and get them killed, but then we don't want to be responsible for the killing of that person. And it's like, that's where yeah, if we're taking like inanimate things like consciousness and ascribing them to a group of people, I want, I know they're strong words, and I'm sure there are a lot of white women out there that would not agree with me necessarily, but maybe I'm preaching to the choir. um but
But maybe like as we're analyzing this, maybe there's a lot of women who would, because having a position of power, of being a neck that can turn the power in the direction that it
mm,
wants to turn the power without having to be responsible for the outcomes of
yeah,
that,
because the
right?
head still makes the
Because
choice, right?
the
The neck turns
and the
it,
head still has the
the head
mouth.
makes
The
the
mouth
choice, and you
says
can
the
blame
thing
the
that it's
head.
going to do. You know what I mean? So like it also fits into this narrative of the woman that was in the kitchen, that the underlying content of what she was saying was, let's get back into our positionality where we supported our men, where we were the ones that had our men understanding that they were the strength of this nation, and our men that
Hmm.
she was speaking towards white identified males, like
Right.
that's clarity, like
Yeah.
we are. I need to go back and revisit the language that she used was so pointed, because I remember listening to it and wanting everyone to listen to it and being like, do you hear this dog whistle call?
Hmm.
Because it is what we're seeing and what we're experiencing in this moment. And we speak to all of the negative things, but what we need to be doing is having conversations. I can't say this more, because I don't believe that people who sit in that understanding are unwilling to explore an expanded thought and sensibility. I don't know, that might be my naivete, that might be my being a peace builder, and also being like a staunch liberationist, you know what I mean? So it's like it's like the pathway that I see for us getting there, because we cannot get to any of these places alone. We
Hmm.
have to be able to be in conversation with people who have a completely different understanding than us, so that we can all start figuring out how we're going to continue in this stream of this flow that is actually occurring together, without losing people, without having like great wars, without like the harm and the violence that is the direction that we're going into, in a very, very real way. We're seeing it live when people are so disturbed by what's coming out of somebody's mouth, out of their own free speech, and the way that they're dealing with it before having a conversation or feeling like they're not being seen and heard, they decide to go take a gun and shoot them out. Even if it's conspiracy theory administration that has set it up, they've
Right.
identified a person, and they're identifying people that they don't like what they're saying and removing them.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
Which
something
they've been
that's
doing, like
actually
it's been doing for, yeah, 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 yeah. It's, yeah, it's so
and it's
interesting.
not,
Go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
And it's not like our government hasn't done this before. When we talk about red baiting, this is when they used to call people communists. It didn't matter where you came from back in the day before whiteness existed. That was directed towards identified Italian people or identified Irish people or
Right.
identified Spanish speaking people that were coming from South America. Like, and that was like German people were,
Mhm.
being red
Anybody that
baited and
didn't
saying
speak
you're communist and you're
English.
against
Yeah.
democracy and we're locking you up and we're criminalizing you and all of those things. And that happened in the United States before white became an identity, but they
Mhm.
still like broke things up according to where your ethnic origin was from Europe.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing this again. It's repetitive violence, and I'm going to use that word, the strength of that word, because we're not seeing the peace and the liberation that we believe that we want. And I say that with hesitation and
Mhm.
kind of caution because I don't know what people actually want at this moment. Because I do see that people are protesting, but I'm also seeing like that our laws are being passed both by Republicans and Democratic
Oh yeah.
folks
The
in
Democrats are
support
voting
of.
for these things. They are voting.
Yeah, but yeah,
Absolutely.
so it really doesn't have anything to do with your political affiliation. It has to do with your position of power, your positionality, and like where you're going to come on the outside of this, under this very hierarchical structure that does push white identified humans into power.
And so, I want to appeal to any white women that might be listening
Hi,
that,
white women.
yeah, hi, white women, that the power that we hold, I want to implore people to get okay with the power that we hold.
Mm,
We,
mm,
instead of sitting in that place of where, our you and I have talked so much about unpacking this what did we say in the last episode? The trauma, the born trauma into our DNA. Alongside that, we have this narrative, this story about our power, white women specifically, and and I want us to, we fought like hell. We burned bras. We did all of this stuff to try to get the right to vote. Of course, it was only the right to vote for the people that look like me. We were even oblivious, or maybe not oblivious, it was a choice to block out not all women, right? Just the white women. And it's like, so the power that we have is really huge. And I want to encourage all white people, all white women that are listening to this, to, if you're not doing your own deep dive of what your power is, what the history of our power is,
mm,
do that. Read books that talk about, there are some amazing books out there that talk about the power of the white woman. And we're seeing it again. The United Daughters of the Confederacy were the ones that went into
mm-hmm,
Texas after the Civil War and made sure that the textbooks reflected their story of the lost cause, which was that it was
mm-hmm,
not about slavery, it was about states'
mm-hmm,
rights, and how the South really won, just nobody noticed, and all of this crap that we've been ingesting for hundreds of years because of the stories that they put in the books. And now the same thing is happening with Turning Point USA, which was owned by the guy that just got assassinated, or founded by, and they're now in a coalition with Moms for Liberty. And the list of the organizations that are in this coalition is
mm-hmm.
just straight out of white nationalist playbook. And white women drive this
KKK,
shit. White women drive
the
this shit.
KKK
Listen to
coalition.
me. White
Yes.
women drive this shit, and we've got to stand in that space where we say we are not going to be part of this anymore. It's going to be okay. You're not going to fall apart. Your life is not going to end. It is going to be innumerably, immeasurably broadened and expanded and beautiful when you get your head out of your fucking ass and stop standing in the place for all these white men and making it their world with their power. And, so anyway, I'm ranting, but I
But
just,
their world and their power creates protection, all right? And
yeah,
most women
yeah.
exist like the most important.
But we
I know the
don't
most
need the
important thing for
protection.
me
We
as a
got
female
what we
bodied
need.
person. Say it again. But
We
for
don't.
me as a female bodied person, the thing that's the most important to me, like when folks ask, is safety and protection. period. It doesn't matter what environment, or that's the most important thing to me is safety and protection.
But that's part of
Um,
the narrative. I think that's part of the narrative that we need that protection, that we are
mhm,
delicate flowers that can't possibly manage the. I mean, yes, there is very real security and safety issues. Women always put their keys in their hands, like so they can use them as a weapon when they walk across the dark parking lot. I'm not saying that those issues aren't real, but the perception, we have to be better about understanding what is real and what is not. And the perception of this safety for you and safety for me as a black woman to a white woman, there is just a small little smidgen, I think, of overlap.
mm,
But the rest of
mm.
it, I
So,
feel like, is totally different. Your safety, you even have to worry about your safety from me, And we
mm,
have this great friendship and relationship and love each other dearly. But I know I can still cause harm to you. And so, but I have to know that to be able to do something about it. And that's what I don't, I want to encourage white women specifically, because when we get a clue about that. And when we really unpack that shit and we really work to it, and you're never going to graduate, so don't think you're going to. You're going to have to work on this the rest of your life. Just get okay with that. But when we do that work, then we can actually stop causing harm and start trying to use the power that we do have to help liberate the whole world,
all of us, yeah.
it's so frustrating because we want to sit in that victimhood because we've been taught that. I do think it's in our DNA, just like trauma
Mhm,
can be in our DNA. I know
mhm.
it's hard to unpack. That's what makes it so hard to see, but you know, we can do it. We can cure our own cancer and we can cure the cancer that we put onto the rest of the world.
Yes.
We have to do it. We are responsible for doing it. So damn it, let's do it.
That's what I was gonna offer, like this, like some solution resolution with what you're speaking into is that even if we're holding the trauma in our DNA, there's also like studies and knowledge that you can replace that trauma with different
Yes.
experiences to create a different outcome for yourself. One is where we have to start, restoring ourselves, and then our relationships to our environments will change and expand.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to hold in this space. And that's how we get to peace, right? Because we said that we were going to talk about freedom of speech, a little bit about power, peace, and liberation. And like, if we're talking about peace in the way that I like to think about it, it's just like the absence of conflicts, like the don't leave me alone, like don't, excuse me, leave me alone, don't bother me
Yeah.
is peace, right? Just let me exist in myself. As long as I'm not harming myself and harming you, it should be okay that I do what it is that I want to do.
Right.
And it's not going to have any impact on you because I'm not going to take your resource because there is, especially in the United States, enough resource for all of us
Plenty
to
to go around.
go,
Hmm.
for everyone to be all right,
Yep.
within capitalistic structures, there's an economy of scale where some people have more than other, but for the most part, you can exist in your own autonomy if people would just leave you alone to do that and not make a judgment on how people are making decisions about what it is that they're doing, as long as they're not harming themselves or you. That's what my thought process is about that. But liberation is what happens when we get to that place. When we leave each other to their own peace, we're liberated to exist in our own autonomy, in our own choices without having someone influencing their power and their control over us. And that's ultimately what people want to get to. It's not rocket science. It's just like really, really uncomplex ways of existing. However, we make it complicated when we decide that we want people to do a certain thing or behave in a certain way because that's what feels comfortable to us. And that is the type of thing that we can only shift when we start having conversations with each other to understand. Because to your point earlier, of white identified humans believing that people are going to behave and make the choices that they have made. Having a conversation helps you to understand that your culture is so totally differently, that you think so totally differently, that will never be the outcome
Hmm.
unless you get to war, where it's just like, I have to protect myself, from the violence that you are coming to
I
me.
love that. I love that definition or that framing of peace is just leave me alone. And then in my head, I was thinking liberation is when you no longer have to be asked, you no longer have to ask to be left alone.
Alone.
When
Absolutely.
liberation happens,
Hmm.
then the peace is and I think that's what I struggled with when we were working for that organization, because peace, you know, it just felt like a vapid word to me. It didn't feel like it didn't feel like it encompassed what we were really hopefully working towards. And I think it was because really the word was liberation more so than peace, because peace will be a byproduct of liberation, you know, it will. And
Yes,
fighting for peace. I mean, I told you
that's
that
an
sticker.
oxymoron.
Well, I told you that sticker that I had on my motorcycle helmet eons ago. Fighting for peace was like fucking for virginity.
Yes,
So talking about fighting for peace always felt
fighting for,
stupid. But
yeah.
but fighting for liberation, that makes sense, and so yeah,
Hmm.
we've got to keep up the fight for liberation, because that's where it's all at. When you
Hmm.
no longer have to ask me to leave you alone, then we're gonna be in the right world. We're gonna be in the right
Yes,
environment.
that is the thing.
So let's get there.
And when people have their own personal consciousness, to leave people alone so that they don't have to ask.
Yes, yes. Lord, that is another thing that yes, white women,
That's what we
especially
want to get to. Be
women,
in their own consciousness to leave people alone. And then we don't have to ask. And
and they
then we don't
don't
have
even
to.
have to ask. Figure it out before.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard? Why am I
continue to
so
ask yourself,
attached? Why do I give a
Why
fuck?
Do I Give a
Why
Fuck
do
is
I
produced
give
in
a fuck?
collaboration with Johanna and
Why do
Deanne.
I try
Music
so
by
hard?
Norwegian
Why do I
musician
care so
Water.
much?
See you next time.
Why do